Today's lesson is absolute value equations and inequalities. We're going to add both equations and inequalities to absolute values today. So our objectives are to solve equations that involve absolute values and to solve inequalities that involve absolute values. Some rules that you need to know. Solving absolute value equations. To solve an equation in the form of absolute value of A equals B, and the numbers have to be greater than 0, you will have two answers. You're going to have A is equal to B and A is equal to negative B. Then you have rules for solving absolute value equations, inequalities, and to solve an inequality in the form of absolute value of A is less than B, and B is greater than 0. You would have negative B is less than A, less than B. So that would be your two answers. Here's your and inequality. And sentences we had in previous lessons. It's an and inequality. That's when you have a less than a number. But when you have a greater, an absolute value of A is greater than B, you're going to have an or equations. So I'm going to show you what that means. Solve each equation. If there's no solution, write no solution. And there's only one way. No solution means the absolute variable equals a negative. You cannot have a negative answer to an absolute value. So you can't say the absolute value of -5 is -5. That does not work. Remember, absolute values is how far something is from 0. It's not a negative or a positive answer. So, to do this, you need to get the absolute values by itself first. That's step 1. So I'm going to subtract on A, I'm going to subtract 5 because I want to get the absolute value all by itself. And so 11 minus 5 is 6. Now, I want to take away the absolute value sign. So that means there are going to be two answers, because what's the absolute value? What two numbers will get you the absolute value? Will get you the answer of 6. Well, absolute value of 6 equals 6, so x equals 6. And it's a positive 6. And absolute value of -6 will also get you that. So I'm going to make it a plus minus sign. That makes it a positive 6 and a -6. And there's your answer. You can write it out. You can say x equals 6 and x equals -6 if you want to. You have both ways you can write it out. B. I'm going to absolute value is not by itself, so can't do that yet. Check and see if it's a no solution or not. So absolute value of t equals 1. Again, it's a positive number, so we don't have a problem. So it would be t equals positive and -1. C, I'm going to divide by -3. The absolute value is not by itself yet. Absolute value of n is -5. Here is where the absolute value is by itself, and it's smaller than 0, so that is a no solution. D. This one's a two-step to get rid of all the numbers attached with the absolute value, so I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So that's 6 equals 3 absolute value of W. Then I'm going to divide by 3. So it's going to be 2 equals absolute value of W. So W must equal positive and -2. Now, when you are doing it where the absolute values has two numbers in it, so you're going to write two separate equations after the absolute values are all by itself. On A, the absolute value is by itself. There's no numbers on the outside of the absolute value on the same side. So you're going to have two equations. You're going to have 2p plus 5 equals 11. And 2p plus 5 equals negative 11. You're going to have two answers for this. And then you do all your steps for it. Subtract 5, 2p equals 6. Subtract 5, 2p equals negative 16. Divide by 2, so p equals 3, and p equals negative 8. So here's your two answers. All right. B, same idea. So try it on your own this time. All right. So you have, at the end, you have C equals 8 and C equals negative 4. All right. For C, negative 5.5 equals an absolute value. Can you have a negative equal to an absolute value? No, you can't. So it's no solution. I-O-N. All right. D, it's all by itself. Absolute value is, so you could do it. 7D equals 14, and 7D equals negative 14. So they're both going to be 2 and a negative 2, so you can do it this way. You can say D equals 2 and D equals negative 2. Or you could just go, I'm going to write it right above it, plus or minus 2. So either one of those will work. All right, next section. Now we're going to get to the inequality part. Again, you're writing two separate equations. This time you're going to graph it also. So you have your two separate equations. You're going to have V minus 3 is greater than or equal to 4. You keep it the same if it's a positive. And V minus 3 is, watch this part, less than or equal to. Notice I switched the inequality. And then I'm going to put negative 4. Then I'm going to add 3. So V is greater or equal to 7. And V is less than or equal to negative 1. Now, check and see if it's an and or. Is V between negative 7 and negative 1? No, because V is less than negative 1 and V. So this is an or problem. And then you have 0 and negative 1 and 7. Close circles on both. And because of or, they're opposite directions. B. Again, you don't have a negative, so it's not no solution. So you have W plus 2 is greater than 5, and W plus 2 is less than negative 5. It looks like it's an or because they're both greater than signs. So this is an or. So I'm going to subtract 2. So W is greater than 3, or W is less than negative 7. Then I graph it. Negative 7, 0, and 3. They're both open circles, and they go opposite directions. All right. This one's a less than sign, so this is going to be an and. So this one you can do it a little differently, and you're going to, because this is a less than sign, you're going to put it, you're going to have less than and less than, and you're going to put in between the absolute value, and you're going to have 15 and negative 15. And then you can do all your work. Subtract 5 to each of these. So you're going to have negative 20 is less than 2n less than 10. So you do your dividing and you'll get negative 10 is less than n less than 5. Then you graph it. You have 0, negative 10, and 5. They're both open. And this is an and, so it goes in between. Word problem. Manufacturing. The ideal diameter of a piston for one type of engineer is 90 millimeters. I think it's millimeters. The actual diameter can vary, so it can vary. So your diameter subtracted absolute value, because you can't have a negative, remember, subtracted by 90. The ideal is at most, so that means has to be less than or equal to 0.008. And then you have to do your stuff. So you're going to have D minus 90 is less than or equal to 0.008. And D minus 90 is greater than or equal to negative 0.008. So add 90 to both. Remember, when you add up decimals, you have to make line up your decimals. So it's going to be D is less than or equal to 90.008, and D will be greater than or equal to 89.992. Okay, so since the diameter will be between those two, remember it's between, so it's going to be this 89.998 and 90.008. And here's your answer for that one. You do not need to graph the word problem. We're just finding the range. And this is the range your piston can be off by. Goodbye.